Cash for keys are on the rise, vacant properties on the rise, and wait times for the LTB hearings on the rise. Yes, all this and more with our good friend and paralegal, Biti Di Lisi, right after this. Yes, my friends, we are back with our favorite paralegal in all the land, Biti Di Lisi. How are you, my friend?
I'm well, Gary. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, excellent. And we're going to cover a few things today. And one of the things that we thought we'd talk about is really just what happens in our weeks leading up to our calls and so forth. But more importantly, both definitely Biti and I, we're kind of that ears to the ground. And we're just going to talk about the realities of what's going on in the current market. But before we do that, Biti always comes prepared with a story, whether it's, an eviction or working with clients, working with tenants. What do you got for us this week?
Well, this week, Gary, unfortunately, we had to break up with a client. We had to, fire a client. And it's not something that happens often. Usually when you retain counsel, you take on a firm, you're retaining them because either you can't do what you want done or you don't know how to do what needs to be done. And we had this client retain our services and we took this client on, and every step of the way was a battle. It's bad enough that we're going to war with the tenants, but having to kind of, battle your own client and then battle their tenant and then battle your own client again and then battle the tenant, it becomes exhausting, not only for myself, but for my team. So unfortunately, we had to let him go. Now, the good thing is, hopefully he can find someone that will do what he wants done, meet his expectations. But it's really hard to meet a goal or achieve a goal when your client is questioning every single thing that you do and not taking advice and not taking direction. And then on top of that, telling you what to do. Like, guys, if you can do this yourself, go and do it yourself. Go and talk to your tenant. Go and convince them to leave. Represent yourselves at the board. It's very difficult. That's the whole point of hiring a legal rep. So if you're hiring someone, it's because you're putting your confidence in that person or in that firm because they have the track record to get the job done.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And it's similar to a conversation that I've had once in a while, and definitely as I'm training our agents in a sense, and I'm sure you do the same. Here's Biti and her firm that do evictions or work with tenants and tenant relationships every single day, multiple times a day, as opposed to maybe once every 6 months or once a year. Same as we handle purchase and sales every single day, as opposed to once every 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, like your parents. Who are you going to listen to, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's all good. And we don't say that, we say it from a position of experience in a sense. And that's where Biti's coming from, I know for sure. And that's the important piece here is, obviously experience provides tremendous, that's the word I'm looking for, amount of value. and you need to listen to those that have been there before, right?
Exactly. The whole point of taking on a professional is because, you are hiring them for their expertise and their direction. Most importantly, if you can't take their direction, then, go and do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. All good. That's a good reminder.
Of course.
Yeah, respectfully, of course. Yeah. We get you. Good stuff. We always, at the end of our videos, we always plug your Instagram feed, and I'm telling you people, my friends, go and follow the Instagram feed. Remind us again what the Instagram channel is.
It's at Stonegate Legal Services.
There you go, my friends.
Lots of great information there.
Yeah, and short little videos and reels of educating landlords and how to handle tenants and how to prepare yourself. And this morning you mentioned you put one up regarding a profession we keep throwing under the bus, and they are one of our favorite professions and friends and so forth. But talk to us a little bit about today's video that you put up.
You know what? Actually, Rob does all of our posts, so I'm gonna have to take a look
Yeah,
at what he put up
yeah, it's
before
all
I can
good.
talk about that.
Well, I know you were talking about working with and being in partnership with police officers and so
Oh
forth. So
yes.
that's your reminder. There you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So we did. I mentioned to Gary this morning that we did a video because everybody's asking us, what role does the police play? And we get tons of calls from landlords thinking that the authority who evicts is the police. And we say, no, it's not the police, right? The police arrive and they just sometimes feel sorry for the tenants who break back in, right? And they allow them to stay even though they were evicted. So we actually did a video this morning. We haven't posted it yet. I just checked out our Instagram to make sure it wasn't posted yet. I think it'll be posted in the coming weeks of the role of the police. Can they evict? Right? And the answer is no, without giving too much of that video away. The answer is no, they cannot evict. The police are there to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Right? And often the police are called to a property after an eviction, usually when the sheriff leave, the locks have been changed, the tenant has been evicted, but for one reason or another, the tenant breaks back in, right? And doesn't leave. That in those cases, the sheriff doesn't come back, the police are called because now it's a break and enter. So just like an instance we have had a little while ago, when the police were called, this particular officer in Barrie, right? He dived off of his emotions and he let these unauthorized occupants, not even tenants, reside in the property. And it was days and days before, and several calls to the sheriff, the ombudsman office, the police division, in order for somebody to, raise an eyebrow and go, this cannot happen. These people are not even the actual tenants on the lease.
Yeah.
So one wrong move, one wrong judgment by an officer, and it can cost the landlord thousands of dollars.
And it's the same too. And I got to do a little shout out to my man Mike, a fellow soccer aficionado and police officer and investor. And he's like, Gary, come on, you keep throwing me under the bus or my profession under the bus. We don't. But it's just the same. Like landlords, when we're not educated, we make mistakes and so forth, or the wrong decisions. When paralegals, the same. When they're not educated, the same thing happens. And it's not that we're throwing one profession under the bus or the other. It's when you don't have that experience or you don't have that information, you tend to perhaps create more hurdles than need be. And again, it's just like any other learning curve. As you gain more experience, you gain more knowledge, right? And don't blame the system. Just blame you've just those are the cards that have been dealt in that current moment. So how do you deal with it is really the message that we're putting across, right? And how do we get in contact with that sheriff once again so we can have that right message delivered to the right people at the right time? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I get it, Gary. I mean, I get it. The officer probably arrived at the property, saw these unauthorized people. Maybe there were women with young children and he felt sorry for them. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Of course, yeah.
But if you don't know why or if they're actually people that belong there, why make that call and provide an opinion, a legal opinion, and have them remain behind? Why take on that liability? That's what boggles my mind.
Yeah. So what I want to know is, as we move on from this conversation to really, what's been going on in your week, and in a sense, it kind of mirrors my week, right? Of course, it would. And you had mentioned to me just off camera that the number of cash for keys files on your desk is increasing exponentially. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, they are skyrocketing from just a couple months ago. And that's probably because the rise in interest rates, that even with those properties listed as tenant occupied, the tenants are not cooperating, or they're not allowing access to the property. And landlords, in some circumstances, the only option they have is a cash for keys. And that's probably because of the extensive delays at the landlord and tenant board,
Yeah.
which are currently still 7 to 8 months,
Yeah, so that's not,
right?
and we've talked about this in many times. We've hired more adjudicators and trying to speed up that process, but all it's done is keep up with the additional files that are coming in, right?
That's right. That's right. Keep in mind, it's a government system, right? So everything in government takes forever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
It does. It does. And what I mentioned to you too off camera is the number of vacant listings that are hitting the market is in some areas, in some pockets, in some products more than double to where it was this same time last year. And for condo units, and in this, where a lot of investors went in the last several years for condos, we're sitting at about 37% of the current active listings in Toronto, mind you, in Toronto. Those units are vacant.
That is
So
insane.
yeah, yeah, incredibly insane. And you had a good point too. Well, perhaps the vacant tax is hurting a few people. Like, yeah, actually, maybe it is. And of course, with the interest rates that have been rising over the last 18 plus months, and perhaps we're looming and setting ourselves up for maybe one more. We're not sure. Some interesting times. And are you feeling the same thing from your investor clients, that I need to get this unit vacant or home vacant so we can sell?
Yeah, I even have. I actually have a client yesterday that sold the property firm, and she had delivered the N12 notice because the buyer requires possession. The property is a single family home. The basement is rented out to the tenant. The main floor is vacant, and the buyer requires possession of the entire property. And yesterday, when we spoke to the tenant's legal rep, the tenant's legal rep said that they have no plans on leaving because everything else is out of reach for the tenant. So the tenant is going to try and stay on as long as possible. My client's not going to be able to meet her obligations in accordance to the agreement of purchase and sale. So, what option does she have? The only option she has is to provide a more aggressive cash for keys than what we had offered before, and hoping that the tenant bites on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of moving parts to that. The N12, and correct me if I have this incorrect. That just stipulates that, in a sense, we've sold the home and we have obliged to provide a vacant unit or a vacant premise. In nowhere does it say the tenant is going to leave. They don't sign on that, right?
No, they don't have to sign an N12. The N12 is a notice,
Mm-hmm.
and the only party who signs it is the landlord. Now, even though the notice basically says, tenant, this property is sold, the purchaser requires possession, leave in 60 days, it also says, tenant, if you don't agree, you don't have to move,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big,
right?
big piece of the puzzle there. And then
That's
from
right.
a closing perspective, there's other moving parts there too, because in your standard purchase and sale agreement, every purchase and sale agreement actually says that a vacant possession will be provided. And of course, in this case, it may not. So then what
Yeah.
happens? Well, my advice to you is don't typically, actually, my advice to you and to everyone out there, do not, and I'm a realtor, do not get the realtors involved. This is a solicitor level. This is lawyer to lawyer, and have them discuss and create the opportunity or the terms to either extend that closing, close with the tenant, let the lawyers deal with it. Realtors, my friends, stay out of the way.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. That is definitely a lawyer conversation for sure. And of course, that's when you pull in people like in paralegals like Biti Di Lisi and her firm to navigate what that to help you with that, because lawyers won't deal with the actual tenants, and that's why we need paralegals and so forth, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't want to get sucked into it, right?
Yeah,
The saga and the poor realtors in the middle. So
yeah. The poor realtor.
the poor realtor,
Whoa,
you
us.
know.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, like I said, we are seeing higher than usual, much higher than usual vacant properties, and we are starting to see just the glimpse. And I wonder if your clients are seeing this too, or are feeling this, just the initial glimpse of perhaps those triplexes or fourplexes, those smaller unit properties coming up for sale. Are you starting to see that a little bit with your clients?
I am. I'm starting to see a lot of duplexes.
Mm,
Lots of them. Whether they're legal duplexes or whether it's a single family home with a basement that can be rented, lots of those.
yeah. Yeah. And that's just where we are. That's the crunch of, the inflation that's all around us, the higher interest rates, the property is most likely underwater in a sense where the income coming in is does not covering the expenses, and something's got to give, right? You can't hang on to a sinking ship forever from that perspective. And not to say
That's right.
all investment properties are sinking ships, but you got to know when to cut your losses and move on. That's for sure. That's for
That's
sure.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's sad in some circumstances just because a lot of people, and I mean, the small landlord only has the secondary property,
Hmm.
right? And the interest rates to go up, coupled by a tenant who takes a position that they're not going to be paying the rent, they're left with no choice but to either, abandon ship or sell the property.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things too, one of my good friends, he owns large apartment. When I say large, I mean 20 units or above apartment buildings. And something that will come to light in the next 6 to 18 months, maybe even sooner, that we'll start to see is the apartment buildings that were purchased since 2018, thereabouts. They're now coming up on their 5-year renewals, which means they initially bought with CMHC financing, and to move to the new renewal, their interest rates are also doubling. And now we're going to see a crunch on those apartment buildings. So, Bitter and I usually discuss, the duplexes and the condos and fourplexes and so forth, but it's affecting the bigger apartment building owners, which is going to create some interesting times because that's purpose built as opposed to, say, a condo in a tower downtown. These are purpose-built rental units. So we're going to see some of those buildings come up for sale. I know we are, because of the interest rate hike. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, and how your field plays a role in that.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Hopefully, a lot of landlords are able to keep, hang on to their investments. They're called investments for a reason, right?
That's right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
see.
Interesting times. Okay, remind us once again how to get a hold of you, and definitely plug the Instagram feed.
Social media, Facebook and Instagram at stonegatelegalservices.ca. You can, well, that's sorry, at Stonegate Legal Services, or you can go on our website, stonegatelegalservices.ca, and you can book a free consult or a discovery call right off the website.
There you go, my friend. So for Biti Di Lisi, I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next video. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now.